Hello, welcome to the Brain Scrub, a somewhat improvised approach to mental health. My name is Glenn Sollers. Thanks for tuning in. This weekend is Father's Day. Mixed emotions for me about Father's Day, as I have not seen my son for 7 years, and I always hope every Father's Day that my phone will ring and I will get a call from him, and maybe this will be the year. So the last 7 years, Father's Day has been a bit depressing for me. It hasn't really been a celebration, more of a reflection. And that's what I want to do today. I believe that fathers are sometimes underappreciated for the things that we do and the balance that we provide in a child's life or in a relationship. And that's not good. I think we need to take the time to actually consider and have gratitude for what dads do. My dad was not the best dad in the world. I think he did the best he could have done based on his circumstances and what he knew and his generational history and what he learned. And when I think about my father, who died about 19 years ago, he was very young. He was 67 years old and passed away. He and I did not have the best of relationships at the time, and I have regrets about that because I ended up pushing him away. And geez, history repeats itself. What's my son doing? Pushing me away. And if I could have my dad in front of me right now, I would give him a big hug. I would love him so much. I would realize that he always did care about me and didn't know how to necessarily share that with me. He didn't always understand me, and that's fine, but I'll never forget a number of things that he did, and that was he always said to me, "I know you'll make it." And that was his way of showing love. He would hug me sometimes when we were leaving his house to go back to my mom's because my mom had custody, and he would have tears in his eyes. He would hold my son, even though it looked really awkward for him because he didn't really know how to hold a child. But I could tell he had so much love and gratitude for having my son in my life. And one of the biggest things I miss about my dad is that he's not here to see my son grow up and to grow and develop. And it's sad for me as well that I'm going through the same thing. Choices were made, things were done, and today is not about being depressed about what happened or beating oneself up about certain things that maybe your father did or did not do, or what I did or did not do. It's more around reflecting on what I bring and what you, if you're a father, bring to this world, to your spouse, your family, your kids. That's really invaluable. And that's the theme of today, is really gratitude, self-reflection, and self-appreciation for the gifts I have. I'm going to share a bit about my story in respect to my father, and then a bit about me. As I'm going through this, I'm hoping that you also take some time to reflect on the gifts that your father may have brought to you. Maybe they're in your life. Maybe they're not in your life. Maybe you have avoided them or detached from them, and maybe there's a chance for you to get back, because I can tell you there's nothing more than I want than to have my son in my life. And I can understand at this point in time it might not be the right time for him to do that because of certain factors. However, I believe fathers have deep love for their kids. Maybe they don't always know how to show it. And if you have a mother, of course, everybody has a mother, everybody has a father. You need the two to make a child. There are differences between the two for the most part. Mothers nourish their children in a different way than fathers do. We have different ways of paying attention to our kids. Plus, we have to be mindful of how our father or mother was parented and what was the family dynamic we had when we were younger. I don't know a lot about my father's side, and I wish I knew more. He didn't really share a lot about what was going on, and I've learned a lot just through my aunt, who was married to my dad's brother, and I only had conversations after my dad passed away. I wish I would have had taken that time to ask him, tell me about your siblings, tell me about your parents. But my father grew up during very turbulent times in Germany. He lived in East Germany, and when the war happened, they had to flee their home. And from what I understand, they had to go through Czechoslovakia and then I believe through Austria, escaping and running away from the war that was happening to save the family. So he grew up with a lot of desperation. He likely grew up with a lot of fear, anxieties. Can you imagine at a young age being in a war-torn country? And I'm sure there's people who might be listening to this that have experienced that. To live in this state of, am I going to be alive tomorrow? Or is my home going to be bombed? We can look at war on TV and it's just war and we think it's us versus them. But if you actually put yourself in the shoes of the people that live in these different countries, what are they experiencing? My barber, he's from Syria, and he shared with me ages ago. I haven't seen him in a while because I've been doing my own haircuts ever since COVID. They don't always look so good. And he said to me that being in Syria was a huge challenge, and he feels bad for his family because you'd hear bombs go off at night and you live in a state of fear. And that's what my dad went through. And he had two brothers. One of them died at a very young age from meningitis, and the other one died 3 months after my father did. But from what I understand, my dad was always kind of rejected by, I believe, his mom. And my dad was a chauvinist. For sure. I am complete opposite of that. But I saw it in how he treated women, which was not fun to watch. But I'm not going to go down the path of what my father did or did not do that didn't align with me or my values or what I feel was the right thing to do. I want to talk about what he did that was right. And there was a lot he did that was right. He took a chance to move to this country from Germany to start new. He was a bit of a risk taker, an adventurer. He was willing to try different things out and put all his effort into it with my mom. They bought 50 acres of land in Ontario. Land that had a small field and the rest was forest. They built their house. They created a home for my brother and I. My dad worked in his own business. He made the money for the home. He was there to support us. My father also, wow, you know what? I've been so drawn into, and I'm just realizing this now, I've been so drawn into the challenges I had with my father that I am struggling trying to find the gifts. And that's sad for me. That's sad for me. My father, let me just connect with my heart here for a moment. My father wasn't there to run around with us, to play in the field with us. He worked. But he had a lot of friends. He was able to connect with people. And some of this I didn't learn until he passed away. He gave a lot of his time, his energy to others in need. People loved the fact that my father could put a smile on their face. He joked around with people. He had many of my relatives in Germany convinced that in Canada we can grow rocks, and he was watering the rocks every day. He was a bullshitter in many respects, which got a lot of laughs. He had his moments where he had so much joy. He helped us open up our minds to differences of opinion. We watched a lot of news. We always were listening to the local news channel as well. My brother and I were very well informed of differences of opinion, of the challenges in the world that we face. And my father was pretty transparent with all that. My father had boundaries, and we follow those boundaries. Yeah, I grew up with some fear, but I'm glad that he did that. We had certain rules at the table: eat with your fork and knife, sit up straight, and it served me well in terms of my career. As I got older, I think I became my father. My father was very independent. He left his family in Germany. And I left my family in Ontario. Decided to move out to the West Coast to start fresh. And maybe he felt as I did, where if you don't want me, I will do it on my own and I will show you. And he had that attitude with people, that he would tell people what he's accomplished and show different things, because he liked that recognition. And being independent allowed him to get that recognition versus being perhaps in a society or a family where he wasn't recognized for his gifts, for what he can do. My dad always tried. He tried harder. He built himself like a mini empire. He bought a building for his office. He was a dental technician. He made false teeth. He rented apartments. He was a go-getter, an entrepreneur. Took a lot of chances. And I do the same thing. I took a lot of chances. I took a lot of risks. And what I can learn from my father is I don't think he ever settled down. I don't think he ever slowed down. He didn't have a lot of self-awareness around the impact of his actions. And I'm so grateful that 20 years ago, I started doing the work of self-healing and looking at myself and understanding how the things I'm doing has a direct impact on others, has a direct impact on my physical body and blood pressure. And maybe if he started at a younger age, because he resorted to alcohol and escapism, I would say, like alcohol was probably one of his ways of escaping. And I'm grateful that I've chosen a different path around that, because he was very overweight, didn't take care of himself. He had a stroke, he had heart attacks. He went through a lot. But I think he was always trying to prove himself and show up. He would be very silent in group settings. And then when he started drinking, he would no longer be silent. And I'm like that too. When it comes to group environments, I can be very, very quiet. I don't always feel like I fit in. And I think he might have struggled with the same thing. So I'm grateful for those lessons that he gave me. I'm grateful for the fact that he always said, Glenn, pay off your debt. Because I became very independent. So as I'm sharing this, I'm realizing, wow, he and I have so many similarities in respect to we're willing to take risks. I'm a do-it-yourselfer. My dad was a do-it-yourselfer. I know a lot of small things about a lot of things. I'm not an expert in any particular area around do-it-yourself kind of stuff, but I figure things out. I'm a problem solver. I am frugal, and my dad was very frugal, but it allowed him and us as kids to learn how to take care of ourselves. He had to take care of himself. My mom had to take care of herself. They had to come to Canada. Well, they chose to come to Canada to buy 50 acres, create a farm, and figure it all out. Wow. If you think about our society now, how often do we do that, where we just go somewhere and we just say, you know what, I'm just going to figure it out. And that's what they did. They left Germany and did all that. Amazing. And I have never built my own house, but I've done a lot of renovation work, and I know how to do that. And I'm so grateful that he gave me those gifts to be self-sufficient. Now, there is an opposite side of that as well, which means that I don't ask for help. Don't like asking for help. I would rather try to do it on my own, which is okay. My dad always wanted to be part of my life, and I became so independent, and maybe this is what happened with him as well, that I ended up pushing him away, because if I can't make you happy for my decisions, why would I involve you in my decisions? It felt like, and it happened when I was 18 and I got my first tattoo. He didn't talk to me. He accused me of being a criminal and kind of pushed me away. We made amends and everything worked out, but we had these turbulent times where we would get angry with each other, and then because ultimately what it was according to my aunt, he just wanted to be involved in my life decisions. But I learned that if I involve you in my life decisions, you may not agree with me, because my dad always liked to be right, and I like to be right sometimes. My dad was very stubborn. I'm very stubborn at times. My dad was very impatient. And these things that I'm noticing myself are good qualities in some respects, but they also can have the opposite effect. So let me get into me as a father and the gifts that I brought to my son. And that is, from a young age, I deeply cared about my son. I would take him for walks. I would proudly put him in my carrier and walk around Toronto. We'd experience different things. I would make sure that he's facing outwards so he could see the world unfold. And I have such fond memories of that. He was so organized. I'm a bit of a clean freak, and my son would make a mess with his toys, but he would clean it all up afterwards. And this was at the age of like 1.5, 2. He would clean up after himself. He started doing things at an age where, I inspired him to do it, like going to the bathroom on his own, taking care of himself in some respects. And then as he got older, I would take him on bike rides. I would walk down to the beach. We lived in a small community called Lions Bay in British Columbia, and I would take him down to the beach, and he would jump off logs and have a great old time, and I would laugh with him. He would have this big smile on his face, and then we got into hiking, and I would put him in the backpack. We'd sing songs together. He learned to be adventurous from me and to try different things out, and that's a gift that dads can bring sometimes, is a sense of adventure and taking a bit of a risk, because we learn from our mistakes. As time went on, we obviously went through some turbulent times with the divorce and everything, but I was always there for him. I moved to Vancouver, as did my ex-wife, and he went to a local school, but then I moved to North Vancouver, which is about 15 kilometers away from Vancouver. So my home was around 15 kilometers away from his school, but I would pick him up on the bike. Sometimes we would be doubling on the bike. So he had this little trailer bike behind me, and we would go back and forth. So he got his exercise. He experienced a different part of the world, and then did a lot of traveling with him too. We were always on little adventures. I'd play soccer with him. I would encourage him in terms of hockey. He was a goalie, and for a dad to sit in the stands, and I'm sure for a mom as well, and watch your son be in net in a hockey game is delightful. It's also a bit freaky because he's the goaltender and he had some anxieties, he had some stress, but he's a natural born leader like I am, an entrepreneur, willing to try different things out. He was in net, and it just made me so proud when he was there looking at pucks, making sure they wouldn't go in the net. He had a lot of fun as well. Like he's goofy like me. He would have a little dance that he would do. He had smiles on his face. And one thing that was mentioned to me when he decided not to live with me anymore is that I pushed him too hard. Because he would get up sometimes in the morning and say, "Dad, I don't want to go to hockey practice. I'm not feeling well." And like me, he had certain anxieties, and like his mom as well, who had some anxieties. I encouraged him. I said, "You know what? Get out of bed. I'll take you there. You have to go. You're the goalie. And if you don't feel well, after about 5 minutes, we'll go home." And not once did he turn around off that ice and go home. And I helped support him around his anxiety, around taking control of things, not letting his anxieties run him. There were times I made mistakes, and my focus was always very different from my ex-wife, actually. She believed the universe played a part in who he is, and they did things around numbers healing, and that your life is created based on the universe, so you have no control over it. And that wasn't my way of thinking at all. I was more about, you create your own life. You make your decisions. You can choose how you want to be and who you want to be. Completely different mindset. So my approach was very different than my ex-wife. And I focused more on, let's do it anyway. It's kind of like if you are afraid of elevators and you don't go in the elevator because you're afraid of them, you may never cure yourself. But if you actually go in the elevator and realize, it's not so bad. And that was my approach with him. We'll just do it and we'll see what happens. And eventually it worked out well. So I was always there to coach him to be more self-aware so he can deal with life and life circumstances on his own. And that was up until the age of 13, where I would encourage him, just take a bus to school. You can do it. To give him that sense of independence versus dependence on others to overcome one's own challenges in life. And that was more of an independent mindset, but also, in my opinion, it was a gift to him around, you do need support, and you can also resolve problems on your own. You can do it on your own. And I want to celebrate that. I also had deep love for him. I also had a lot of fear about my ex-wife. And sadly, he definitely brought that fear on to himself as well. He mentioned he feared my ex. And I wish I would have had more courage. But again, I'm going off a different rail here. Isn't this? I just find it funny how sometimes we look at our faults and we don't think about our strengths. And it kind of brings me back to my dad. How I was thinking about him and I automatically go to his faults versus what are his strengths. So I'm going to end this podcast by saying I'm so grateful that I had an opportunity, and I am still a father, to give life to a child and see him grow up. And I may not see him, well, I don't see him now, but I do know kind of what he's doing through social media. That he's become very independent. He is fun. He jokes around. He seems like a very sociable individual. He has a unique character about him. He's becoming his own man on his journey. And when I see him on these videos, I see a lot of me in him. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I've been so resilient, that I've given him space that he has asked for, that I haven't given up on him, that there's always hope, that I've taken care of myself, which my dad never seemed to do. He didn't seem to take care of himself. He ran away. I'm not running. I am strong, resilient, compassionate, caring, resourceful. I have so much love. I'm spreading my love, which aligns with my mission in life, to build a stronger world and community through understanding, loving, and working through problems with others. We only have one life. And as a father, yes, he's my child. He's not in my life. But it doesn't negate all those things that I do in general. If I were to ask my friends, what value do I bring? And I'm sure they would probably mention some of the things that I mentioned to you. So my way of being a father, the way of me celebrating Father's Day, is just celebrating me as an individual. Not as a father, but as somebody who makes a difference in the world we live in. To all of you dads out there, and to all of you that have dads, take this time to learn from your father, if he's still alive, or reflect on what might my father have been through. What has made him, or made him in the past, the person he became? What can you love about him? What gifts did he bring you? How does that show up in you? And if you don't have a relationship with your father, know that likely they care deeply about you and they want nothing more than to be part of your life. If we run away from our fathers, it doesn't make life easier. And there's so much lost time that one can have with the parent. And wow, I've had 19 years of lost time with my dad because he passed away. And I had many years prior to that where we were not really part of each other's lives. Have these heart-to-heart conversations with your parent. Resolve any differences. Show your love. Seek to understand. Then be understood. Thanks for listening, and happy Father's Day.